Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Back to Boris Johnson, and the Foreign Secretary has been accused of undermining the Prime Minister after an article he wrote about the UK about Brexit. He was accused of backseat driving, but in the last few minutes the PM has said the government is being driven from the front. Mr Johnson is in New York for the UN General Assembly. But how long can he keep his job? Joining us now from Westminster is the Guardian columnist and author Owen and commentator for the Mail on Sunday, Dan Hodges. Hello to you, gentlemen. Thank you both for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. Same question to both of you, I suppose. Dan Hodges, to you first of all. How long can he keep his job?
Well, he can keep his job as long as Theresa May wants to keep him in post. I mean, I think which will be a while. I mean, I don't think Theresa May will sack him because I don't think she needs to sack him, to be honest. I mean, I think obviously Boris's comments have damaged the government to an extent. They've damaged her to an extent, but the person who's been damaged the most by them is Boris Johnson himself. I mean, he's completely isolated himself. There's no support, meaningful support within the cabinet. He's very isolated within the parliamentary party. So I suspect she will just leave him twisting in the wind very much as he did that time famously when he was mayor.
Owen Jones?
Yeah, I mean, Theresa May has lost her authority. She's unable to sack people who are, frankly, quite clearly undermining her very limited authority in public. We've seen now Amber Rudd yesterday slapping him down, the Home Secretary, for backseat driving, and now Theresa May, the Prime Minister, slapped him down too. Look, the reality is he has to go. It's an embarrassment to this country internationally that this man is our representative on the global stage. That £350 million figure, which the Leave campaigns, the official Leave campaigns promised during the referendum, the only time that figure, that lie, that con, that dishonesty, that deceit should ever be heard is from their mouths, is to apologise to the nation for lying. There was no £350 million extra. It didn't take into account the rebate we got from the European Union, and it didn't take into account the money we'd have to spend on various initiatives which are currently pulled through the European Union. I'm afraid it undermines our democracy when politicians throw around those statistics. The other point about that column, that awful column, is the attack to young people in this country for having, pro-EU young people, for having split loyalties. We've heard people who don't agree with the Tories' Brexit policy denounced variously as saboteurs and enemies of the people and unpatriotic and all the rest. And I think, given the Tories have lost the support of the vast majority of young people, insulting them as unpatriotic hardly seems helpful to me either. But there's a whole litany of reasons why he should go. His whole history, he got sacked twice for lying, once by a newspaper editor, once by his own party leader. He described black people as pickaninnies with watermelon smiles. He said if we had equal marriage, then why not have two men marrying a goat or a horse? I can't remember which. His continued presence as our chief representative on the global stage, which he should never have been appointed to by Theresa May, is embarrassing, and it's shameful that he had to be slapped down by the head of the Statistics Authority for continuing to do anything other than grovel and apologise for that figure, the false £350 million figure in the first place.
Dan Hodges, I mean, he does appear at the moment most certainly to be a lame duck Foreign Secretary, even though he is at the United Nations representing the United Kingdom at the moment. Bit of a challenge when in the middle of Brexit negotiations, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think one of the reasons why we've had this outburst from Boris is, it's pretty much an open secret within Westminster that he's been marginalised during those discussions. Now, allies of Boris might say that's why they're not been proceeding that well, but the reality is he's always been very much tangential to the discussions. I mean, what I find astonishing, actually, I mean, I actually agree with a lot of Owen's criticisms, in particular the sort of the attack on the patriotism of young people. And I mean, it's not so long ago that Boris Johnson was actually something of a poster boy for modern progressive conservatism. That's how he managed to win 2 successive elections in what is, as we now know, is the Labour stronghold of London, and why he has sought to rebrand himself as a sort of Jacob Rees-Mogg without the principles is frankly beyond me. But I mean, he's done it. That's the reality. And as you say, he's a lame duck, I think, as a Foreign Secretary. and as a frontline politician now.
Yeah, Owen Jones, he broke cover too early, didn't he? I mean, he is still popular, though, amongst many of, maybe not the rank and file of the Conservative Party, but a lot of young people like Boris.
I don't think that's true at all anymore. I think Dan's right. That probably was the case in the past. Boris Johnson's popularity has collapsed because he was seen over Brexit to have taken an unprincipled position because he thought that would best benefit his political career. You know, look, he wrote that article basically setting out his leadership stall on the day of a terrorist attack. How crass is that? And the truth is, this country is in a right old state, right old mess, and it's because of the manoeuvrings of Tory politicians calling the referendum to assuage divisions within the Conservative Party and then calling a snap general election to wipe out the Labour Party, which backfired and has reduced this country to something of a laughingstock. It's a great country, but it is seen, it's not taken particularly seriously by the very 27 European Union governments we need to negotiate a Brexit deal with, and that is hardly helped by the likes of Boris Johnson, who chose the day of a terrorist attack on the people of this country to set out a leadership stall and undermine an already fatally weakened Prime Minister. And I just think it's beginning to rile a bit, where the Tories continue, they set the house on fire, then they say they're the only ones who can set the fire out. Continually partisan manoeuvrings on the part of Conservative politicians like Boris Johnson. The future of this country is at stake. This is, at the moment, the most serious crisis that we've had since the end of the war. It's a very delicate crisis. It has to be managed very well. It's not going to be managed well if you've got continued manoeuvrings, selfish manoeuvrings by people who are looking after their own career, not the future of the country.
Dan Hodges, I can't remember, was it Dennis Healey who said don't examine your entrails in the midst of battle? And is that not what we are doing? Just looking at pictures as I'm talking to you of Boris meeting Donald Trump over at the UN. So on the world stage, he's still seen as, you know, a major representative for the United Kingdom.
Well, if Boris is meeting Donald Trump today, I mean, that's just the image his battered reputation needs. I mean, he needs that like he needs a hole in the head. But no, I mean, I think paradoxically, I mean, obviously Owen's been making great play about the problems of the Conservative Party. I think paradoxically, I think this will actually is strangely helping Theresa May to one extent in it's uniting the Conservative Party around her, and it's uniting them against Boris Johnson. As I said, I mean, the anger, speaking to Tory MPs today, I mean, their anger at Boris is genuine, and they're communicating to me that the anger is also being reflected within the constituency parties of the Conservative Party, who had the view that actually Theresa May had to some extent managed to stabilise their position. So as we were approaching a conference which everybody was saying was going to be a very, very tricky conference for Theresa May. I mean, obviously to an extent it still will be, but I also think it's going to be quite a tricky conference for Boris Johnson. It'll be very interesting to see now what reaction he gets from the rank and file when he sweeps into Manchester.
So he's gone too early, as far, Owen Jones, as far as being the next leader of the country, and perhaps, well, maybe the party, but probably the country as well, is concerned. And so you are gunning for people like Amber Rudd, who was pretty impressive yesterday.
Well, Amber Rudd has a very small majority. It's just a reality. If you don't want to be targeted by people who wish to replace you, then don't be so silly enough to lose your majority. I mean, she's got, obviously, what we've seen in the last election is what were relatively safe seats have become Tory marginals. Boris Johnson's seat, by the way, he had a majority of over 10,000. His collapsed now to 5,000. Ian Duncan-Smith, 8,500 down to 2,500. So Amber Rudd is hardly alone. Look, I mean, with Amber Rudd herself, the reality is, yes, people would look at it and say she campaigned for Remain during the referendum. I'm not sure how that will win over the Tory grassroots, to be perfectly honest, in a leadership contest in which Jacob Rees-Mogg, a man who believes abortion should be banned in all cases, including rape and incest, has emerged as a front runner to become leader. I just don't think she's a competitive figure in that field. But the truth is, obviously, I suppose if I was going to asking about Amber Rudd, from everything from the bedroom tax to cuts to public services to privatising the NHS, etc., she's a Conservative, and obviously I would like to see her replaced, of course.
I'm sure you would, but I'm not sure.
Was that the question? I didn't know what you asked, sorry.
My question was, you're obviously targeting Amber Rudd because you think she's quite a threat.
Well, no, I don't, I'm afraid. I just don't, because I don't think she's very likely to become leader in a party in which the favourite is, at the moment, Jacob Rees-Mogg. I don't think the Conservative grassroots understand the scale of their problem, that Labour have a 52-point lead amongst 18 to 24-year-olds. Back in the early 80s, the Tories had a 9-point lead amongst 18 to 24-year-olds. Do I think Amber Rudd has the answers to everything from the housing crisis to the lack of secure jobs to stagnating wages for younger people? I just don't. I think at the moment, and I'm going to Tory conference, so it'll be fascinating to see, I haven't heard any serious discussion amongst Conservatives about how they claw back the support of younger people. I'm going to try and dive into that age group because I'm 33 now, even though I don't often look at it. But people under 45 have increasingly turned away from the Conservatives. And every single day there are thousands of 18th birthdays and thousands of new Labour voters. What are they doing to try and address that? I just don't know. I genuinely don't.
I don't look 33 either, sadly.
You look very
Dan
young,
Hodges,
Kate,
Dan Hodges, well, we've got you. And that's the rub, isn't it? That if not Theresa May, then whom?
Well, I mean, I think part of the problem for the Conservatives is there isn't an obvious replacement for or anybody that would change their fortunes. I mean, I do think, I mean, I wrote it about it a bit this weekend. I do think there is a growing mood within the Conservative Party, within the parliamentary party and amongst grassroots Conservatives that when the time comes, it may be approaching a point where they need to skip a generation and start to look at some of the stable of younger Tories, but it will take time. It will take at least 2 years for some of them to come through, which is why Theresa May's reshuffle, not just about whether she dumps Boris, but whether she brings through some of the newer generation, is going to be fascinating when it comes.
Okay, it's good to talk to both of you as always. Thank you so much for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. Thanks a lot.